Sorry to open with this at the start of a brand new week, but in just 2 weeks' time, so not next Monday, but the following Monday, I'll be sitting here doing a video and there'll be no Celtic matches on the horizon for any of us. Season 22-23 will be over and we'll be around 2 months away from Celtic's next competitive match. It always kind of seems to come around quite quickly, quicker than you expect at the end of the season, and it seems like we're at that stage again. That's the kind of sad/bad/irrelevant news. The good news is that we have 3 more Celtic matches between now and that point, and we could lift 2 trophies between now and then as well if things go to plan. Talking of cups, by the way, I was doing a wee clear out earlier and I came across some of the classic mugs that have been purchased by... Didn't mean to actually do that. Anyway, might as well just show you them now at this stage. We had the classic 67 Hail Hail one. Pretty basic, pretty run-of-the-mill, some would say. Who can forget the famous Eddie Howe one? I met someone recently, I can't remember who it was, and was asking whether I still had them. Well, I've got one. How you doing? How you doing anyway? Etc, etc. I completely forgot about this one. The Europa Conference League. Remember those days when we played in that competition? We're obviously more fond of the Champions League nowadays. And probably my favourite from the early days of the Ange era, Trust the Process. And that has certainly paid dividends for all of us Celtic fans. So yeah, I was having a wee clean out of them later, and don't know what I'll do with them. Don't know if I'll keep them, don't know if I'll chuck them, might auction them off for charity or something like that. Anyway, it was a disappointing weekend as far as Celtic were concerned. On Saturday we had the first team just not hitting the levels that we know they can and they consistently have this season. 2-2 draw at home to St Mirren. In the grand scheme of things, doesn't really matter. Results certainly, but the performance, I think, was a bit of a disappointment. And then slightly differently, yesterday, Celtic FC women did their bit on the final day of the SWPL season. We beat Hearts 2-0 at Celtic Park in front of a great crowd, more on that later. But it wasn't enough to win the SWPL title. A late goal from Glasgow City against Rangers at Ibrox meant that they are the champions, and it was disappointing. I think there's 2 very different things going on with Celtic FC women at the moment. Number one is the obvious disappointment of yesterday. You could see it on Fran Alonso, on the players' faces. Caitlin Hayes especially, I think, was certainly close to tears. And Fran Alonso's post-match kind of media comments were kind of tough to kind of watch, and clearly a lot of emotion there and real just real sadness, I guess, at not being able to get the job done and win a first league title for Celtic. It was a real story of what could have been, as you see there, agonisingly close. Would have been champions had Glasgow City not got that late winner at Ibrox. And yeah, a bit of frustration there as well, because I saw us play a couple of times recently against Glasgow City, once at Celtic Park and once away from home in the league a few weeks prior, and we beat them. And to be honest, kind of battered them both times, especially in the second half. And we're a better team than Glasgow City, but they've obviously won the league. So frustration there. I think it was those recent derby matches against Rangers that hurt us in the end. If we could just have turned one of those into victories, we would have been champions. So yeah, a real story of what could have been. That's the disappointing part. I think the other part of it, which I really want to kind of spend more time talking about, and to be honest, which is much bigger than Fran Alonso, Caitlin Hayes, any of the other players, or even this season as a whole, is the profile / stature of this team in terms of Celtic as a whole. And I think it's grown to a point that probably not many of us could really have expected. The crowd at Celtic Park yesterday was another record for the SWPL, 15,822, which is just like a pretty astonishing crowd when you think about it. When you think about what this team, was averaging earlier in the season, what they would have even got a year ago in this kind of title race, I just think it's a sign of how the Celtic support have taken to this team. Obviously, there's other things going on as well. I think the Celtic end has been a massive draw for people to go to these games. Obviously, having them at Celtic Park as well has been massive, and these are things that I really hope that the club can keep up next season. Let's get more and more games at Celtic Park. I think Sky Sports need to show more games. BBC Alba do a great job, but for obvious reasons, Sky Sports are the ones who can really push this to the next level, and I certainly expect that to be the case going forward. But I think overall it's a really it's been a really good period, and they obviously have the Scottish Cup final against Rangers at Hampden Park next Sunday as well. Just quickly wanted to say it is a second placed finish for the team. Obviously, the plus side of that is that we have secured a Champions League qualification place for next season. I've been looking into the UWCL a wee bit, and it works very similarly to the UEFA Champions League. There's a coefficient system. Scotland is currently ranked 13th in that. That gives us 2 places into the Champions League. So the league winners, Glasgow City, go into the Champions route of qualifying. Celtic go into the league route. The differences start to come in terms of the group stage. The UWCL only has 16 teams in its group stage as opposed to 32 at the moment in the Men's Champions League, and only 5 of those 16 teams come from the qualifying path that Celtic will find themselves in, and there are a fair few of Europe's big hitters in there as well. Now, to get to the group stage, we may have to beat the likes of Paris Saint-Germain, who are one of the best teams in Europe, Real Madrid, who are one of the best teams in the Europe, Slavia Prague, Rosengard, who may not sound like mega names, but in the women's game, they are all in the top 13 in Europe at the moment. And these are just teams we may have to beat to get through to the group stage. The second team in the English WSL, probably looking like Manchester United, could also be an opponent. So, yeah, it may seem like we've qualified for the Champions League yesterday, but I think it's going to be an astonishingly difficult task for Fran Alonso's team to get into the group stage. I think probably the best we can hope for is to draw one of Europe's best, maybe find a way to get the game at Celtic Park again, get a bumper crowd in, and really just see how the team matches up against one of Europe's best. Right, we're going to leave that there and turn to Saturday's Premiership game. Me and Asim did do the reaction after the game. That's linked at the top of the screen for you there. And to be honest, I haven't really changed too much since then. I'm struggling to get too frustrated by the recent performances and results. Maybe that makes me a happy clapper. Maybe you'll call me that. I just am kind of happy to accept that performances are going to dip after you get the job done officially. I just think that's natural. Maybe under this team and given the whole we never stop mantra and the fact that we have so many players kind of ready to come in if others aren't at their best, there was a hope that we'd be able to keep this consistency up till the end of the season. But I just think it was so natural after you go over the line and won the league that there would be a little bit of a drop-off. And I think we've seen that certainly in recent weeks. For me, as long as we win the Scottish Cup, I will be more than happy with how this season has gone. Having said that, though, it would be nice to finish the Premiership season strongly. We have got Hibs on Wednesday. It'd be good to see a reaction then. But certainly for Saturday and Trophy Day, it'd be really nice to put in a big performance there as well. And just raise everyone's moods ahead of, well, A, the session after the game and the celebrations, and B, the Scottish Cup final a week later. Ange didn't shy away from kind of admitting that our levels have dropped in recent weeks. Post-match, speaking to BBC Radio Scotland, he said, "It's fair to say we've gone off it a little bit in the last couple of weeks, particularly in the defensive side of the game. When you do that, it's very hard to play the football we want to. It's not one player. It's got nothing to do with Cameron Carter-Vickers. We've missed him before. We played Champions League football without Carter-Vickers. That's the easy thing to look at. That's not how we view things. We're not working as hard off the ball as we were prior to winning the title. And when you don't, that's what happens. You can't dominate games of football like we did." Now, I feel like the Cameron Carter-Vickers absence is a major factor in Celtic's drop-off. Ange is never going to say that publicly because it effectively gives the rest of the squad a pass or an excuse until CCV is back. But I think it's, a major factor along with that natural kind of drop-off that I spoke about. We did create chances on Saturday. Now, that's not me saying that, Callum McGregor, Rayo Hatate, Jota, Dyson Maeda can't play much better. I don't think any of those four were particularly great on Saturday. But for me, the major issue, far more than the kind of attacking stuff and the lack of whatever, was how soft we looked at the back. Tomoki Iwata really struggled. I thought Joe Hart didn't cover himself in glory at all. I thought Ralston struggled. Even someone like Greg Taylor wasn't at his best on Saturday. We've not been able to say that often this season. So it's clear there's something going on there. And for me, the major issue is how easily we can be got at when Carter-Vickers isn't there. And yeah, that is certainly a concern. Now, Kent Grady is of a similar mindset, commenting and saying, "If anyone ever doubted that CCV is the most valuable member of the squad, the last two matches should have confirmed it. 5 points dropped and 5 goals conceded in 2 matches. That's 41% of the points dropped all season and 1.76 more goals conceded per match in 2 league games without him than in the previous 34 with him. If I were his agent, I would be demanding an immediate substantial wage rise. He is by far the most important player on the team. It's not even open for debate." So how important is CCV for us? Well, I spent far too long earlier making this graphic which compares our record with and without CCV this season. So there, obviously, on the left we have the with record and on the right we have the without, and obviously we've played the majority of our matches with him, but still a decent chunk there. We're not just talking about a few games without him. He has missed 11 matches so far this season. And yeah, as you could probably have expected, the numbers are much more favourable there with CCV in the team. We've won 85% of our matches when he has been playing, only 55% when he's not. The drawn figure is obviously roughly the same, but look at that lost percentage. Only 5% of our matches lost with CCV in the team. That goes up to 36% when he's not around. Goals conceded is more than double when CCV is not around, and the clean sheets are roughly halved as well. And it's not as if we've kind of picked certain matches there. I think he did play in 4 of our 6 Champions League games, CCV, so it's not as if they're skewed in that way. And you think back to kind of our most kind of worrying and fragile performances in the league this season, and you think St Mirren away, no CCV. Ibrox last week, no CCV. The weekend there, no CCV, and there's certainly a theme. So it's worth bearing in mind. I think he's an extremely important player. Is he our most important player? Perhaps. I mean, I think we've got a number of them that we would struggle without. I think we would struggle without Kyogo, struggle without Callum McGregor, Rayo Hatate. But I do get the point about CCV perhaps being the most important, given when you see that drop off and how he kind of holds that defence together at times. That's not to say that the likes of Starfelt and Taylor haven't had good seasons, but would they have been as good had CCV not been there? I get the impression no. Anyway, we'll move on. Iron Boy wants to pick on someone else, saying Joe Hart has been poor as well the last few weeks. Again, in this game, he was poor. And I must say, Iron Boy, not the only one mentioning Joe Hart. Numerous comments in on Saturday's video saying we need to upgrade on Joe Hart. I thought he was poor for the first goal, certainly on Saturday. I think, last week at Ibrox, he was at fault for at least one of the goals. I think his performance hasn't been great in recent weeks. He's not the only one who's had a drop-off. In terms of upgrading Hart in the summer, it wouldn't be a major priority for me. I think, just speaking personally, I think there are more pressing matters in this team, and it's also a major risk to change someone who is doing absolutely fine. He's been a good signing, Joe Hart. I don't think there's a major issue there. And you just have to remember the state of our keepers when he came in, to just kind of remind yourself that it isn't a gimme that you get someone as good as Joe Hart, as much as maybe people feel he is underperforming a bit right now. Having said that, if Ange has a goalkeeper who he thinks can come in and maybe be more suited to our playing style, or maybe make more big saves that are needed at the top level in big moments, then I'm 100% happy to back Ange. But I do think it is a little bit of a risk. But yeah, that's only my opinion. Moving on, Alan Woods. I'm glad we got a tough game. We are seeing who can handle it next year. The cup final, though, will take care of itself. Hampden at 5:30 kickoff will be rocking. I must say, Alan, I agree. I'm struggling with this kind of notion that suddenly, just because we're off it a little bit, this cup final is going to be a really, really tough game, and that Celtic are going to struggle to beat Inverness. I just think it's a totally different game, a totally different atmosphere at Hampden that day as there was on Saturday, a totally different feeling for the players, a totally different competition, one that hasn't been put to bed so far. And I think they'll all be aware of that. And just with it being the last game of the season, I think we'll see a better performance from us that day. I certainly don't think there's any chance we go into a game like that playing the way we did on Saturday. Again, I understand maybe why people feel that way, but it's just not something that I feel personally. I honestly think it's just a natural drop-off that this team are experiencing, that they've hit the levels all season consistently, and surely when the league title gets sealed and when Ange makes a couple of changes, as well, especially last week, surely you feel some sort of effect. Even more so when Alistair Johnson and Cameron Carter-Vickers aren't around. I don't think it's anything major to worry about. My prediction, by the way, is that we'll get a little bit of a reaction on Wednesday. We'll probably see some changes in that game as well. Then Saturday could be anything, to be honest. We've all been to trophy days when Celtic have been outstanding. Last year was one. We've also been to trophy days when it's all been about just getting the trophy and the game has been abysmal, and who knows, it could be that as well. But I think for the big one, the cup final the following week, as I say, it will just be totally different for this team. I think we'll get closer to the levels we have reached this season, and I think we'll do more than enough to lift the trophy, which is really all that really matters right now. Anyway, tomorrow we will be back, or I'll be back, chatting about the Hibs game at Easter Road and any other news that comes up between now and then. Chat to you then.